Now we're going to go over some stuff with our bow. So go ahead and get your bow, and we're going to look at our bow together. This is your bow. Let's go over some of the parts of the bow real quick. Okay, so we've got the frog, which is this part down here. If you take a look at this frog part, right, it's like there's an eye and the mouth, and this is the upper lip and this is the lower lip. Okay, this silver part's actually called the ferrule, right? And this is the end screw or adjusting screw. This is the wrap, this like rubber or plastic part, and this is the winding, which is usually made out of plastic or some kind of metal or other string. And the frog actually slides up and down in a slot in the stick, which I think I showed you at one point. I think I took the end screw out, which I'm going to do now just to show you. Now you don't have to do this all the way, but if I loosen the end screw by turning it to the left and I'm holding the bottom of the frog, you'll feel the frog moving as you do this, and it's going to move towards the tip, and as you do that, as you loosen it by turning it to the left, you're going to see that the bow hair becomes really floppy. Okay? Becomes really loose and floppy, and this is actually good for when you store the bow. Okay, when you store the bow in your case, you want your bow hair to be floppy, because that means that the least amount of tension is on the bow, and that's the best way to store it, because if the bow is always tight, then when the seasons change and the bow wood starts to get dry, it can freeze in that tightened position, or it could cause damage to the stick, which we don't want. So you always want to loosen the bow hairs. Now if I keep going and keep loosening it, you'll see there's a space that develops between the screw and the bow, and eventually it'll just come right out. Ta-da! Now, we don't really want to do this, and you should never need to do it, but in case it happens, you don't need to panic. All that will happen if you let go of the frog now is that it'll come out of its slot, and then it'll become a swing. It'll become a bow hair swing. Oh, your bow's not broken, okay? Don't worry. All you gotta do is have mom and dad reattach it, or if that makes them nervous, they can just bring it back at your next lesson. You just have to put the eyelet back in the slot and hold it on and reattach the screw. Oh, and you would also want to make sure that the bow hair is not twisted. You'll know it's not twisted if when you hold the stick, the bow hair, the frog just stays where it is. If it's twisted, what'll happen is it'll unravel, or it'll spin around, and so when it stops spinning, then you know that the bow hair is not twisted. Then you just put it back in there, and you take the screw and you put it back in while holding the frog against the stick, and then you just screw to the right until the bow hair starts to get tight. And you can watch this happen. Watch the loose bow hair. As I turn to the right, it's going to get tight, and that floppy bow hair is going to become like a single band of bow hairs. Okay. Now I like to tighten my bow hair tight enough so that I can get my pinky finger just in the middle, in between the bow hair and the stick, at the middle point. Okay, just this part of my pinky is going to go in there. Okay, kind of like this. That's generally a good baseline for small children. Maybe their pinky finger is too small. Maybe we do the thumb or the first finger up to the first joint. It just depends on how small their fingers are. So we tighten our bow hair to the appropriate tightness when we want to play with the bow. Okay. The last thing that you need on the bow hair is called rosin. Rosin is processed tree sap that's been dried, and usually it's dried into a shape that can be stored easily. Mine is a little circle like this, and mine is kind of like green like this, and yours might be black or reddish or something. or yellow. And the purpose of rosin is that when you rub it on the bow hairs, it actually makes the bow hairs sticky, because tree sap is kind of sticky. And it also, what it does is there are these little hooks on your bow hair which you can't see. They're very, very, very small. It's like you have to see them with a microscope. And when the bow hair is new, those hooks are actually flat. But when you rub them and you make friction against them, then they stand up and they become like hooks that can grab things. And what happens when you rub it with the rosin is those hooks stand up, and then the rosin gets caked up around the hooks, and then the hair becomes more grippy. And so it actually can grip the strings of your instrument and create more friction. And that's what causes the string to vibrate. The bow hair grips the strings with those little hooks and with the sticky rosin, and it causes the strings to vibrate. So when we apply rosin, we want to I like to do a whole bunch of big motions to apply it, and I just hold the frog like this. I'm not even using my bow hold, but you can if you want. Once your bow hold gets more secure, you can apply it using your bow hold. But I usually just hold it like this, and I'm gonna push that bow hair against the rosin pretty strong. Okay, and I do also some small bow strokes, some small strokes like this, all the way up and down the length. Sometimes if you need to grab the stick closer to the tip so that you don't fall off the rosin and drop your bow, you can hold it closer to the tip and you can apply the rosin to the end of the bow hair nice and strong. Now, you don't have to do rosin every single time you play. Some people make that mistake, and then what happens is this huge cloud of rosin dust comes out from their bow every single time they play, and it coats everything. It coats the instrument and the strings and the bow, and it's just kind of a mess that you have to clean up, because if you don't clean up the rosin dust, then it will actually it will get into the paint or the varnish that's on your instrument and your bow, and it makes it sticky and gross, and it just kind of ruins the way that it looks. So we don't want that. Every time you play, even if you don't put rosin on again, you want to clean up the instrument by using a cloth. It can be just they have them special at the violin stores, but you can just use an old sock or an old piece of a t-shirt or something like that. It's kind of hard to see, but can you see the dust on the instrument? There's a lot of dust. It's built up. Oh, maybe if I do this. So the dust needs to get wiped off. Here's my cloth. I'm going to wipe off the dust. I wipe underneath. I wipe on the sides. I wipe the strings. And I wipe, sometimes I wipe under the bridge, or under the fingerboard like this. And then I wipe underneath the bridge on the other side. And sometimes I wipe under the tailpiece too, like this. Just try to get all of the rosin dust off. Nice and shiny. We should also wipe the bow. I grab the stick with the cloth and I just drag it along the length of the bow stick and go up and down once and get off all the rosin dust to make it nice and shiny again. Shiny!